Moscow has been struck again, and this time Ukraine came to blind the Russian army's eyes on the front, and it hit dead center. On the morning of June 30th, Zelensky announced that Ukrainian forces had struck the Dubna Space Communication Center in the Moscow region, more than 500 kilometers inside the Russian border, roughly 120 kilometers north of the capital. And this was not the first time. The same facility had been hit only a week earlier on the night of June 22nd, twice within a single week. So why this facility? In short, Dubna is Russia's largest ground-based satellite communications complex. It manages Russia's military satellites, pulls reconnaissance data down to the ground, and most critically coordinates the activities of Russian occupation forces in Ukraine. It is the very system that lets an army see and talk on the battlefield. The same town also hosts, according to reports, the design bureau that builds KH-101 and KH-69 cruise missiles, along with a drone production plant. So, in a single location, the communications brain and the source of the missiles hitting the front side by side. To understand how large a prize this is for Ukraine and what it means for the front, you have to go back a few months. Putin's entire war plan depended on one thing: an unbroken real-time link to the front, a commander issuing orders to his unit, reconnaissance images reaching the line, drones being flown remotely, artillery getting accurate coordinates. All of it depends on that link. The irony is striking. For years, Russia built that link largely on the network of an American company, Starlink. But in February 2026, SpaceX shut down the unauthorized Starlink terminals across the occupied areas, and the entire occupation army, more than 700,000 strong at the front, went blind overnight. The result on the ground was devastating. Russian commanders lost real-time video and secure communications. According to the Wall Street Journal, units fell back to Cold War-era radios. Ukraine seized the opening immediately. It retook more than 400 square kilometers and liberated 8 settlements, its largest territorial gain in 2.5 years. So what was left in Putin's hands? After that, his own military satellites and the ground stations that run them. The largest of those is Dubna. Once Starlink was gone, that was the last great eye the army still had. And it is that eye Ukraine is now reaching for. Let us look more closely at why this facility matters so much. According to Zelensky, it is used above all for reconnaissance and for coordinating the activities of Russian occupation forces in Ukraine. Unit-to-unit communications, reconnaissance data flowing to the front, drone links, overall operational coordination, all of it passes through nodes like this. In modern war, giving an army a satellite is one thing. Building the system that carries the data from that satellite to the right commander fast is another thing entirely. Dubna sits at the heart of that second function. The brain layer where data is distributed and satellites are commanded. The bridge between the eye in space and the soldier on the ground. Once Starlink was cut, this satellite network was precisely what Russia had left. Striking this facility means hitting not just a building, but Putin's remaining backup eye. So how does a facility this well-defended get hit at all? Putin has massed air defense over Moscow in this entire corridor. S-400s, Panzer batteries, hundreds of positions. Yet cheap drones arriving low and in swarms saturate that shield. And Ukraine, by its own military's account, systematically destroyed the radars around Bryansk to open a corridor toward the capital. Even with 419 drones reportedly shot down that night, if the handful that mattered reached the target, the rest is cold comfort. The ground beneath the capital is no longer safe. What makes this strike truly significant is not Dubna alone. It is that Dubna is the final link in a chain Ukraine has been building for months. Let us walk through it. First, Ukraine pushed the Russian army back, seizing the initiative in the gap that opened when Starlink was cut in February. Then, it gained more than 400 kilometers in the south, its largest advance in 2.5 years. But Kiev did not stop there. It carried the war deep into Russia, no longer just defending, but setting the tempo. It went after the critical logistics arteries feeding the front and the occupation forces, and began to besiege and isolate Crimea. So much so that on June 26th, a state of emergency was declared on the peninsula. In the same stretch, Ukraine opened a second front, the economic one. It struck the refineries feeding Moscow and St. Petersburg and pushed Russia into a fuel shortage, a direct blow to the war machine. And then, in the last week of June, in the very first days of the 40-day operation launched to force Russia to end the war, Dubna's turn came. So why Dubna and why right now? Simple. As long as that facility stood, this entire Ukrainian plan would remain half-finished. As long as Russia could keep its land corridor, its reconnaissance eye, and its command network alive through satellites in some form, it held an edge on the ground one way or another. Ukraine cracked the front, cut the logistics, and drained the fuel. What remained was the one great eye the Russian army could still see through. Dubna is the missing final piece of that picture. That is why this strike is no ordinary raid. It is the move that completes a plan. So, what does this strike produce on the ground? You do not need to guess. It played out this exact way in February. First, command and control. When the satellite link weakens, the Russian unit's chain of command starts to break down. Reconnaissance data arrives late, and frontline units risk being left uncoordinated. Russia's top-down, heavily centralized command structure only deepens that dependence. Higher headquarters cannot make decisions without timely data from the front. A forward observer or drone operator calling for fire also needs a fast, secure link. Weaken it, and the artillery fires. Late and off target. Every link in modern warfare's kill chain, see the target, relay it, strike it, depends on that connection. Snap one link, and the whole chain slows. That is precisely what happened in February. According to Ukraine's defense minister Fedorov, enemy drone feeds dropped 11-fold, and the gap between detection and reaction turned lethal for Russia. Second, the fallback. With its own satellite network under strain, Russia slides back to interceptable radios and cruder channels, which is effectively a gift to Ukraine's signals intelligence. In February, as Russian commanders broadcast their plans over open frequencies, one Ukrainian intelligence specialist said they were hearing Russian orders sometimes a full day ahead. An army's most secret plans begin falling into the enemy's hands. Third, the drone waves. Russia coordinated its attack drone launches against Ukraine through that satellite link too. When the link weakens, the pace and accuracy of those barrages can both drop, exactly as happened in February. And fourth, the data flow. When reconnaissance and communications traffic lags, an army sees its targets late and strikes late. And none of this happens in isolation. Russia is already dealing with a fuel and logistics crisis, its refineries burning, Crimea cut off. These crises feed each other. A convoy without fuel delays resupply. Blind reconnaissance misses the target. A clogged command chain makes both worse. That is the essence of Ukraine's strategy. The blow to the satellite communications brain is the newest and most sophisticated link in that logic. What this means is that whichever sector you look at, the picture is the same. Russia's moves are already sitting at the edge of their coordination capacity. Let the eye that feeds that coordination go dark once more, and the February scene could replay across a far wider stretch. In the south, the stage is already set. The corridor reaching toward Crimea is there. The arteries feeding the peninsula are already under pressure, and even as Russia presses toward Orikhiv and Huliaipol, its momentum is slowing. Should Russia's eye in the south go dark again, it is far from unthinkable that Ukraine could double the distance it gained in February, and that could push the siege of Crimea several steps further. In the east, the picture is striking too. The center of gravity of Russia's spring-summer offensive is the Kramatorsk-Kostiantynivka defensive belt, the fortress at the heart of Donetsk. But by ISW's account, Russia has stalled here. The number of troops able to infiltrate the city sits somewhere between 100 and 150, and Moscow is reportedly fabricating supposed successes with AI-generated footage. The fortifications built over more than a decade still hold. If an offensive whose coordination is fed from space goes blind, this Russian main effort could halt altogether. Around Pokrovsk, Russia seized the city in early 2026, but has made no meaningful advance west of it since December 2025. It captured a critical logistics junction, yet cannot use it. A blinded reconnaissance network makes any attempt to break that situation far harder. To the north, along the Lyman and Kupiansk axis, Russia is probing at various points, but Ukraine is pushing back consistently. A Russian advance with a fading satellite eye would struggle to sustain even these limited operations. The second major advantage is reach. As Russia's reconnaissance satellite data weakens, so does its early warning against Ukrainian strikes deep inside Russian territory. Hitting the satellite brain makes the next deep strikes easier. Other satellite centers, refineries, missile and drone plants. It is a self-reinforcing loop. Every blind spot removes an obstacle in front of the next strike. And to protect Moscow and these facilities, Russia is forced to pull air defense off the front. So the deep strikes also thin out Russia's frontline defenses. There's a diplomatic dimension too. That 40-day operation runs toward the Allied Summer Summit and toward August 4th. Building the picture that shows Russia at its weakest and Ukraine at its strongest right before the table is set, blinding the Russian army's satellite eye could be one part of that picture. But what truly magnifies the strike on Dubna is that its effect does not stop at the Ukrainian front. This blow concerns the entire Russian army, and indeed the Russian state. Russia's active military today numbers roughly 1.5 million. More than 700,000 of them are on the Ukrainian front. The rest, some 800,000 more, are spread across the country through garrisons, strategic commands, logistics lines, and remote regions. And here is the core of it. Dubna is a national satellite node that affects not only the units at the front, but this entire dispersed force. In a country as vast as Russia, from the Baltic to the Pacific, from the Arctic to the Black Sea, wherever terrestrial communications are thin Units, ships, aircraft, and strategic assets all ride on the same military satellite backbone. Air Force, ground troops, Navy, all three draw on that backbone. And Dubna is one of its largest ground hubs. This is not about one sector's radios. It is the nervous system of an entire army. The private in the trench and the headquarters in Moscow share the same eye. But the deepest part of all this is not even the question of repair. The real point is this. This facility in what is considered the most heavily defended capital on Earth can be targeted at all, and whenever Ukraine chooses. That is the Kremlin's true nightmare. A facility can be repaired, but a sense of untouchability once broken is not easily restored. The narrative Russia fed for years, that the rear is safe, the capital untouchable, the army invincible, collapses right here, and it forces the Kremlin to reconsider its entire strategy. Where to mass air defense, which facility to move deeper, whether to pull resources off the front. Putin also has a quieter, more technical worry. Replacing this capability is not straightforward. The large antenna damaged in the first strike was not Russian-made. It was built by Japan's NEC. And that single detail sums up how deeply dependent Russia's space sector has been on Western technology for decades. Before 2014, around 42% of the electronic components in Russian satellite fleets were imported. Up to 90% of the radiation-hardened parts in the newest GLONASS satellites came from abroad. The 2022 sanctions turned that dependence into a crisis. The flow of advanced components from the US, Europe, and Japan was largely cut off. Russia has tried to close the gap with domestic production and through China, but both are struggling. Homegrown parts perform below standard, and Chinese components mostly fall short of military space requirements. Russia's largest satellite operator conceded that by mid-2024, it had only replaced about 60% of the affected foreign components. So replacing that high-tech gear once it is damaged is no simple job. It cannot be bought from the West, or produced at the same quality. Even the first experimental satellites of Russia's planned domestic Starlink equivalent have been postponed indefinitely. If Putin's first panic is losing his eye, the second is being unable to easily put it back. Russia can manage this blow for a while. It has backup capacity and can shift some functions to other centers. But Ukraine is striking those very backup centers too. Days before Dubna, another facility was hit in the Vladimir region, and repairs cannot keep pace with the strikes. The same facility hit twice in a single week is the proof of that. And of course, this war cuts both ways. In the wide drone barrage over the Moscow region that same night, civilians lost their lives as well. The Kremlin has used that to blame Kyiv. That is the campaign's unseen heavy side. But the military picture is clear. Ukraine is not targeting the front. It is targeting the eye that watches the front. In February, a single decision by an American company produced the largest rupture in 2.5 years. Now Ukraine is trying to build that same blindness, this time through Russia's own network by its own hand. The difference is telling. In February, the one pressing the button was Elon Musk. This time, it is Ukrainian drones with a 500 kilometer reach. One question remains. Is this an ordinary strike or the quiet preparation for the next great move? Leave your answer in the comments.